Condoms for Hamas.
Hot dog is my favorite meat.
Well, hello.
Well, the Young Turks, the online news show. Cenk, Jordan Uygur with you guys. Exciting day. First 100 days for Donald Trump. So exciting. I wonder how he did. Well, we're going to give you an update on that. And then we've got a lot of different fun topics for you guys today. Democrats have young guard versus old guard. We're going to talk about that, of course. And then various disasters under Donald Trump, including now sending American citizen children abroad, deporting them, without, of course, as always, due process. So lots of disasters. And then, you know how we're doing more interviews now at 8 o'clock Eastern after the main 2-hour show is over? Today, Larry Krasner, DA in Philadelphia, kind of a legendary progressive prosecutor. So that should be a super interesting conversation in a lot of different ways. So don't miss that one. All right, my brother Jordan Uygur is on Rebel headquarters, of course, where he is a bit of a murderer. And he's also the host of the Insurgents podcast. I mean, you're killing it, so hence you're a murderer.
Sure.
All right, Jordan, how you doing, brother?
You know, I'm doing all right. We've got some really fun ones, and I'm excited for the story at the end of the hour, where you and I might have a little bit of a disagreement.
No, me and you have a disagreement? Okay, that'll be fun. Let's get to it. All right, so let's do the first story.
Take a look at this.
And these numbers are just horrible. There's no way to sugarcoat it. And 41% approve of him now. It was 44% back in 2017 around the 100-day mark. You see the 41%, that is 12 points below Joe Biden. That's 3 points below where he was in his first term. Look at where Obama was, 63%. He's 22 points below that. And George W. Bush at this point in 2001, he is, I mean, again, 21 points below. And as you pointed out in your opening, Jessica Dean, I look back at all of the polling we possibly could long before I was born, and Trump's 41% at 100 days is the worst on record.
Tomorrow will mark President Donald Trump's 100th day in office. And according to that CNN poll, the American people aren't happy with how Trump has kicked off his second term. There is a lot more data and more interesting numbers to discuss, including some data on how the 2026 midterms are shaping up. But first, Cenk, what are your thoughts on that first clip?
Yeah, he's hurt, dog. Don't ask him if he's all right. And then later in the show, we're going to show you some of the things he's backpedaling out of because it's such a disaster. But for the purposes of this story, what I'm interested in is what is driving down his numbers? Because in the beginning of his term, his numbers are actually pretty good. And for Trump, they were quite terrific. And they've taken a massive turn in the last couple of months. Why? I think that's really interesting. We'll get to that in a sec.
So the two issues that Trump focused his campaign on, immigration and the economy, have fallen out from underneath him. But according to that poll, Americans still think he's doing a good job handling one issue. Let's watch more.
There's only one data point where Trump is above 45%. It comes to his handling of gender identity policy. He's at 51%. Every other issue, immigration, where he has long been above water. Look at this, below water, 45%. How about the economy? My goodness gracious, he was elected to fix the economy, just 39%. And of course, the tariff war, 34% on that. I mean, the bottom line here is just very simply, the numbers for Donald Trump are awful, awful, awful in this poll. And then of course, you look again on the economy, we compare it to where we were back in 2017. You see the 49% there. Look here, 39%, 10 points below. And Donald Trump on the economy here, it's not just the lowest for this term, it's the lowest for any president on record 100 days into a presidency.
Now, Americans aren't just unhappy over how Trump is handling the issues. They're also unhappy with how he's using his authority. According to CNN's polling, in December of last year, 46% of Americans had no confidence Trump would use his presidential power responsibly. That number has jumped to 54% of Americans now. That's more bad news for Trump. According to an aggregate of 3 polls, Trump isn't just dragging down his own numbers, he's also putting House Republicans in a tough spot for 2026. Here's more on that.
If the House GOP is under any illusions that Donald Trump's fall in the polls won't bring them down as well, they are living on fantasy island. What are we talking about here? Let's take a look at the generic congressional ballot. Democrats versus Republicans. We have 3 polls out within the last few weeks. What do they all show? They all show the Democrats up by 2 points in the CNBC poll. The Fox News poll that was out on Friday, look at that, Democrats up by 7. The New York Times poll that was out this Friday as well, but Democrats by 3. Where are we seeing it? We've spoken about it, Mr. Berman. We're talking about independents. This is how you know that Trump is bringing down the House GOP. Look at Trump's net favorable rating. In October of 2024, according to the New York Times, it was -9 points. Look at where it is now, -30 points among independents. That's horrific. That's historically awful. So I went back through history, right? And I looked at the opposition minority party. That, of course, is the Democrats right now. They're a minority in the House to the opposition of the party in the White House, Donald Trump, a Republican. The average House seats won by the opposition minority party, 234 when leading the generic ballot this early by at least 4 percentage points. That happened in 2006 and 2018.
Unsurprisingly, Trump is unhappy with those bad numbers, and he took to Truth Social to vent about it. Writing, great pollster John McLaughlin, one of the most highly respected in the industry, has just stated that the failing New York Times poll and the ABC Washington Post poll about a person named Donald J. Trump, me, are fake polls from fake news organizations. The New York Times has only 37% Trump 2024 voters, and the ABC Washington Post poll has only 34% Trump voters. Unheard of numbers unless looking for a negative result, which they are. These people should be investigated for election fraud. And add in the Fox News pollster while you're at it. They are negative criminals who apologize to their subscribers and readers after I win elections big, much bigger than their polls showed I would win, lose a lot of credibility, and then go on cheating and lying for the next cycle, only worse. They suffer from Trump derangement syndrome, and there is nothing that anyone or anything can do about it. I wish them well, but we'll continue to fight to make America great again. Now, in the New York Times poll that John McLaughlin referenced, 38% of respondents voted for Trump, 38% voted for Kamala Harris, and 16% didn't vote in the last election. So the poll was, in fact, evenly distributed. The ABC Washington Post Ipsos poll is a similar case. 35% of respondents voted for Trump, rounded up. 35% voted for Harris, and 30% didn't vote in the last election. So, Cenk, it seems balanced. Just seems like Donald Trump doesn't like the results.
Yeah, so a couple of issues here. First, let's talk about Trump's reaction, because this is usual buffoonish. So, he misspells the word loose. Like he says, he means lose and he says loose. No one corrects it, he doesn't correct it. I know it's not a big deal, except the president shouldn't be a child, and he shouldn't rant in the middle of the night, and he should have staffers who check to make sure he gets things right. Okay, fine. And we all got used to the fact that he spells like a third grader, he talks like a third grader, and I know that that's advantages in some ways. But when and then he says, Donald J. Trump, that's me. Everybody knows it's you. Everybody knows it's you. And so the fact that folks haven't gotten tired of what a buffoon he is in that sense, it's greatly frustrating, right? And so now when it comes to the important matters, So they should be investigated for election fraud. Brother, the next election isn't for like a year and 9 months. What are you talking about? And this stupid idea he has in his head, if somebody writes something bad about me, it's election fraud. That's not a thing, man. If that was true, we'd have no freedom of the press. The First Amendment would be in the trash. And so or freedom of speech. So when Biden was in mental decline, if anyone said he was in mental decline, should they have been locked up for election fraud? Because that's Trump's dumbass idea here. If you insult the president, it's election fraud. No, it's not. You're a stupid politician. We get to insult you all we want. We get to criticize you all we want. And stop crying, for God's sake, man. Pull yourself together. So then, secondly, this isn't even criticism. This is just a poll. And I'm so sick of politicians definitely on both sides. Whenever they're winning, they're like, oh, look at the polls, we're up, right? Whenever they're losing, polls don't matter, I have to put on polls. They're just numbers. Sometimes they're a little off, sometimes they're more off than we hope for, sometimes they're exactly on, but overall they give you a snapshot. It's not the end all be all, elections are end all be all, but it's a snapshot. Is the snapshot accurate here? Whether every single number or not is or not, that Trump is declining, definitely. Okay, so let's say that he's not losing independents by 30, he's losing them by 27. Does that make you feel better if you're a Trump supporter? What difference does it make? Oh, it's wildly off. He's only losing independents by 23 points. And by the way, it could be the other way. What if it's off in the other direction and he's losing them by 37, right? Okay, fine, say 23. It doesn't matter. His poll numbers are definitely going down. It's the same polls that before, when he was finally above 50% in the beginning of his term, the Republicans were celebrating. And this same Harry Enten segments on CNN when he was showing really good poll numbers for Trump. And of course, back then the Democrats were like, no, I don't believe it, I don't believe any poll. If Kamala Harris is losing, I don't believe any poll. Now all of a sudden the Democrats are back to believing, Trump is back to not believing. So guys, if you're a viewer or voter out there, etc., please stop listening to politicians, right? So just take a look at the same poll and what's the trend, right? Back in the beginning of his term, his trend was pretty good. He was doing better than he did in his first term, and it made sense. He just won the popular vote, and he did a couple of things. Now we get to why they're going down. He did a couple of things in the beginning that were actually very popular. And again, if you're a Democrat, I know, that's it. You hate me forever because I said that Trump did something that was popular in the beginning. Go ahead, go nuts, okay? But we're gonna just keep telling the truth here at the Young Turks. So when he closed down the border, that was whether you like it or not, it was very popular with the American people, right? And the economy it was good because Biden handed him an economy that was doing pretty well, and we talked about that a lot. Okay, so what went wrong? Well, he started going nuts. So both sides don't understand that most of the voters are not in your bubble. They're not in your bubble. So by the way, there's a number in that poll that you showed. There's the only thing that Trump is still popular on is transports. Sorry, okay, there's a bubble on the left that thinks no, that's not the case. It is the case, okay? It's the only thing he's holding on to. Okay, so then you look at the right wing, Trump and all the things he's doing poorly on, that's a much longer list, okay? So he's now underwater on immigration. He closed the border, he was so overwhelmingly popular on immigration a minute ago. And now, why is he underwater? Because he's going unconstitutional. What was the need to go unconstitutional? Why did you have to get rid of due process, the cornerstone of Western civilization? Why are you constantly ignoring the courts? Why are you ignoring the Constitution? This is exactly what I talked about in my debates with conservatives before the election about Trump. Like, oh, you hate the establishment, why are you voting against Trump? Because Trump, forget the establishment, forget the current corrupt system. First of all, he's not doing anything about that. All he's doing is he's about to do another $5 trillion at a minimum of tax cuts for the establishment. Total fake populist. But on top of that, my number one concern was the Constitution, because he said, oh, if I lose, we should terminate it. There's been massive fraud. Everything with him is, oh, massive fraud. So I get to burn the Constitution. I get to arrest people without due process. And I want to stop anyone from criticizing me or polling me, right? No, that's not how it works. And your infantile mind doesn't understand that, okay? So, and I'm talking about Trump here, not his voters. So he lost people on immigration, an issue he had massive support on because he always goes too far, always. And why is he going too far? Because he's, golly geez, really determined to keep America safe? No, he's always testing the boundaries of his power. We're gonna talk about that a little bit in the next story here on the show. Obviously watch live 6 to 8 p.m., get all the stories. But he's, can I run for a third term? Can I ignore the courts? Can I burn the Constitution? Can I violate that law? Can I violate that article in the Constitution? Because he loves power. He's obsessed with power. Me Trump, me Trump. That's like him in a nutshell, right? Finally, 39% on the economy. What a buffoon. I mean, Biden handed you record low unemployment. And by the way, in the first term before COVID, he done well on unemployment. We're a fair show, we give you actual facts. This isn't about partisanship, okay? He had done well on unemployment in the first term before COVID. Now, we're worried about unemployment going up because of the tariffs. We're worried about inflation going up because of the tariffs. We're worried about the stock market, we're worried about the bond market, we're worried about average Americans having to pay higher prices. That used to be his pillar. The economy was the strongest part of his polling for the entirety of his career. And now that's in the toilet. Why? Because people didn't vote for this. They didn't vote for global nuclear tariffs. They didn't vote for higher prices. They voted for lower prices. He's in his bubble where he's like, oh yeah, everyone around me, Stephen Miller, Steve Bannon, everybody else, we're all such extremists. So people love radical extremists, don't they? No, they don't. No, they don't. They just wanted lower inflation, low prices, and they wanted the border shut down. So the reason why and this is more, news for Trump supporters. If you're bewildered why these numbers are lower, it's not complicated because you might think, oh, these radical ideas are awesome, and the Constitution, take it or leave it. But the overwhelming majority of Americans do not think that. Jordan.
Yeah, I think that's what's so interesting about these polling numbers. It's not necessarily that his base is turning on him. I think they're just going to stick with him in the long run. It is the people who didn't vote who are most interesting to me, and I'd be curious to see breakouts. But you got to imagine that this downward shift in these approval ratings on these different issues comes from people who don't have strong affinity or loyalty for Trump and the MAGA movement. They want to see some sort of change on these issues, specifically like the economy, on prices. Trump made that the bedrock of his campaign. And now that he's in office, he's telling people, oh no, it's not that bad. Egg prices aren't that high. Yeah, they are. Profits for the largest egg manufacturer in the country tripled. Profits tripled, not revenue, profit, pure profit, year over year. So they are exploiting an avian flu and keeping prices high to justify or to continue to enrich their investors and their executives at the cost of working people. And Trump doesn't care. He'll just try to lie to the American consumer base saying, no, it's not that bad. He loosely kind of threatened auto manufacturers, oh, don't raise prices, and then turned around a couple days later and said, oh, I don't care if they do because of these tariffs. He is creating these problems and rising prices through a haphazard implementation of tariffs that most economists say will not work and will not achieve the desired outcome that he and his team, which is largely comprised of people who are just yes men, think it will. So I guess I'm not surprised that these numbers are going down because they don't know what they're doing. They're doing things that'll deliberately inflame these problems, and no one is in his circle. No one's close enough to steer him in the right direction or steer him in a better direction. The one thing that's just kind of ludicrous that people are at 51%, that's, I wouldn't say overwhelming, but barely approve of, is just gender identity, which none of that affects our material conditions. None of that affects people's kitchen table issues. It doesn't help them make ends meet. That's just pure animus. So if that's all they can hang their hat on, good luck. But when it comes time for midterms, as they talked about later in that segment, that's not going to be enough to win. So Trump has been in this situation before. He got into office by promising people a lot of things, couldn't deliver. There was voter backlash, and they lost in midterms. So hopefully it's a repeat of the same situation.
All right, last couple of things here. First, as the founder of Rebellion PAC, I'll say if you actually care about all the issues like higher wages, lower drug prices, all the economic populism that Trump promised but never delivered, go to rebellionpac.com. We're running candidates who actually will deliver as Democrats. And although independents have also signed the populist plank, which is on tyt.com/populist plank, including Dan Osborne, a great independent out of Nebraska. Now, last set of polls here. 66% of Americans find Donald Trump's term so far chaotic. 59% find it scary. So I'm gonna get to more in a second. But this is why. This is why he's lost popularity. This is why the Republicans have lost popularity. They're doing unpopular things that are extreme, and people are finding it chaotic and scary, including a significant number of Republicans. Speaking of which, so when they asked about the sending US citizens to El Salvador, I know if you're a certain portion of MAGA, like, no, he didn't say send homegrown citizens to El Salvador. Yes, he did. Okay, by the way, half of them are like, yeah, of course you should send them to El Salvador, and half of them are like, no, he didn't say that, because that's embarrassing if he said that. And that I'm talking about hardcore MAGA. Meanwhile, the independents left the building already, and MAGA doesn't even realize it. So to that point, on that issue, overall on Americans, should he be allowed to send people to US citizens to El Salvador without due process, as he has said definitively that he wants to? 10% of Americans say yes, 73% of Americans say no, hell no. 11% of independents say yes, 73% of independents say no. Oh, good news, you're only losing independents by 62 points in that case. And finally, how about Republicans? They're still on board with him, right? No, even among Republicans, only 21% said yes to that harebrained scheme, and 56% said hell no. And then there's some that are in the middle. So why? Why would you talk about sending American citizens to a foreign dungeon? Why are you kidnapping people off the streets because they criticized Israel? And again, later in the program, even Chuck Schumer's like, what are you doing? Yeah, I'm worried about anti-Semitism, but you're cutting off money to Harvard, you're kidnapping people off the streets. No, don't do that. In fact, 7 Jewish senators wrote a letter to Trump saying, what are you doing? No, we didn't ask for this. This is crazy. And that's the problem with Donald Trump. He is, as my dad says, the crazy. And he can't help himself. So this. Look, we have a poll. I'm curious how you guys voted. Better, the first 100 days from better than expected, worse than expected, or what you expected. And I gotta say, unfortunately, and this is why I voted against him, this is exactly what I expected. I'd vote C, okay? So people say worse, at least what is it, 6% say better? Okay, how could this be better? Even if you're a MAGA, really better than you expected? Okay, you wanted higher prices, you're super psyched about that? You hated the Constitution and you love that he keeps threatening to take away giant chunks of it? Okay, have at it, Hoss, but the rest of the country has left the building. All right, we're gonna take a break here. We'll take the break, we'll read some of your comments during the social break, of course, as we usually do. And then when we come back, we're gonna talk about that issue that I was telling you about, which is Trump running for a 3rd term. So what does he say about it now? And why is he saying it? That's very interesting. We'll be right back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk Jordan with you guys. Also, JG214, thank you for joining, brother. We appreciate it. They hit the join button below. And CL gifted a Young Turks membership on YouTube and thereby became an American hero. All right, Jordan, what's next?
Take a look at this.
I've had more people say, please run again. I said, we have a long way to go before we even think about that. But I've had a lot of people. People are asking me to run, and there's a whole story about running for a 3rd term. I don't know. I never looked into it. They do say there's a way you can do it, but I don't know about that.
Donald Trump has been sending the American people mixed signals about whether or not he's serious about running for a 3rd term. And Cenk, you seem to have a theory about why that is, right?
I do. So I think that he is constantly testing the limits of his power. If you said to him, here's a button like your Diet Coke button, and if you press it, you become dictator. We are done with the Constitution, but you rule forever and you have as much money as you want. Do you know how quickly he'd press that button? I mean, even take out the money part, right? He'll find him. I mean, if he's dictator, he can have whatever he wants, right? So he's like most American people think like, no. He even if you don't, well, for the folks who don't like him now, they might finally be here at that point. But I've been saying from day one, because he says it all the time. He's always talking about, oh, dictators are amazing. They can kill anyone they like, and when they enter the room, everyone has to applaud. And I love their military parades, and I don't want to leave when I lose. I want a third term, etc. He would press that button so quick, he'd be like, right? So, but now there's a twist to the story. Why is there a twist? Because my theory is he does turn around when he gets unpopular, really unpopular. So let's see how it played out in this story. Go ahead, Jordan.
So last Friday, the Trump organization started selling Trump 2028 merchandise. Then today, The Atlantic published a long interview they conducted with Trump that covered an array of topics, including him potentially running in 2028. Ashley Parker and Michael Shearer write, we asked Trump about a rumor we'd heard that he had tasked his Justice Department with looking into the legality of his running again in 2028. He said he hadn't, but then seemed to leave open the possibility. That would be a big shattering, wouldn't it? He mused, laughing. Well, maybe I'm just trying to shatter, he noted. Twice that his supporters regularly shout for him to seek a third term, but concluded, it's not something that I'm looking to do. And I think it would be a very hard thing to do. But that's not exactly what he told Kristen Welker at NBC less than a month ago. A lot of people want me to do it, but I mean, I basically tell them we have a long way to go, it's very early in the administration. Asked to clarify if he was serious about running again, Trump said, I'm not joking, but it's far too early to think about it. When asked whether he has been presented with plans that allow him to seek a third term, Trump said, there are methods which you could do it. Welker asked about a possible scenario in which JD Vance would run for president and then pass the role to Trump, a tactic some of his allies have already started promoting. Trump responded that that's one method, but there are others too. So he could be joking, he could just be entertaining the fanfare. But to me, Cenk, especially with the merch, it seems like they're at least considering it. They're exploring a way in which they might be able to try it.
Yeah, of course, that's what he always does. He does these test trials. Now, what if I don't listen to the courts? Let's see how that one polls. Let's see how people react to that. In the beginning, pretty good. Oh, Rogan says he likes due process. Okay, let's see if we rethink that one. Let's see how things go. And on this one, part of what they do, guys, is they'll say it and they'll say, and as Trump has said, that he wasn't joking, right? Because in the beginning, when you're testing it, you don't want to say you're joking, otherwise it ruins the test. So he says, yes, I'm thinking of running for a third term. There's a lot of ways to do it. No, I'm not joking. And if it had come back with a lot of MAGA and a lot of independents and good polling, coming back and going, yeah, boy, we hate the Constitution too. Let's go burn it together. Woohoo! If that had been the reaction, he'd have kept going and going and going until he ran for a third term and an 18th term, right? So, but instead, what he got back was, what are you, stupid? No. And even from Republicans. The polling shows, we covered it a little bit earlier in the show, but when they were asked about this, of course, Democrats are dead set against it. Independents hated it. And even Republicans are like, no, just do your job, right? So not all, but a good number of Republicans were in that category. So it didn't play well. And we'll show you some of the numbers in a second. And then so now that his polling is dropping and it's not working, now he's back to, yeah, I was just joking. And that allows every MAGA guy to say every time he tries to do something unconstitutional, oh, he's just trolling, man, he's just trolling. And by the way, is that what we want out of a president? Someone who's constantly trolling like an idiot? Like a like literally, I was gonna say like a troll online, but that's literally what he is. And he's the president of the United States and the commander in chief. Jesus Christ, man, grow up. If you're in the opposition and you're, 13 years old or 21 years old and you're having fun trolling, woohoo, yeah, I trolled him, okay, or you're Ken Klippenstein and you're just having fun, no problem. But you're the president of the United States and you're still trolling about setting the Constitution on fire? How is that fun? So, all right, I mean, this is exactly what we were worried about. The guy who said he'd terminate the Constitution after he lost, here he is trying to terminate the Constitution. But when he gets caught with his hand in the cookie jar, I was just kidding, man. Yeah, sure you were, buddy.
Now, I want to remind people, if you can remember this, in March of 2024, Brett Ehrlich, Mark Thompson, and I were on a power panel on March 29th. And we covered an op-ed that a Project 2025 partner wrote about how Trump could seek a third term. And I remember the conversation back then, people just dismissed it. Oh no, he won't do that. He can't do that. We're just past a year later and they're looking at it. They're evaluating it. They're selling merch over it. So again, we're going back to, hey, Project 2025 and people in that orbit were telegraphing everything they wanted to do. And much of that had to do with undoing the Constitution. And here we are. Their argument then was the 22nd Amendment only applied to consecutive terms. So they said Trump was entitled to 2 consecutive terms. The first one, for some reason, didn't count. And of course, we know that's ludicrous and this would be patently unconstitutional under today's standards because of the 22nd Amendment, but they don't seem to care because it's all about power for them. All of their rhetoric about constitutional principles are going back to the origins of the founders, notwithstanding that this came later because of FDR. None of that really matters or holds weight. It's just a inconvenient burden or obstacle in the way of some sort of objective that the right wants. And you're seeing it play out here. My only thing that makes me think he might not want to run is just that he's exhausted. It's a tiring job. He just wants to go off into the sunset, golf, relax, but still maintain some sense of importance and fanfare. He likes the attention, he likes the cameras. So if there was some sort of arrangement where he could be kind of like a president and have the president aesthetic while not having to do any of the responsibility, that I think would be the ideal solution for him. But the only thing I think preventing him, Cenk, from a third term or seeking a third term would just be the workload that accompanies it.
Yeah. There's a hilarious Fox News article about this where they say, this was just 6 days ago. They're like, yeah, polling for him running for a third term does not poll well, very, very badly. But it's such a bad number, they don't even state it in the article. But they do at the end of the article go, okay, fine, even 53% of Republicans think bad idea, don't do that. So now he sees the polling and he goes back to, I was just joking. Woohoo! The president's a clown. Woohoo! Okay, all right. Man, I'll take it. I'm glad he's going back, and I hope he shuts up about it. And they, instead of burning the Constitution, they burn those stupid Trump 2028 hats, and we move on with our lives. But by the way, guys, that's a huge thing, right? What are we most worried about is that they mess around with elections, they mess around with the Constitution. So the fact that he's walking it back now that it's deeply unpopular is a good thing. The fact that he ever proposed it is maniacally bad, right? But at least he's responding to the polling, including among a majority of Republicans, and thank God he's walking it back.
On Friday, there were 3 American citizen children born here who were deported along with their mothers from Louisiana down to Honduras. And according to advocates, one of them is a 4-year-old child with stage 4 cancer.
We don't deport U.S. citizens.
The mother was deported along with the children.
The children aren't deported. The mother chose to take the children with her. When you enter the country illegally, and you know you're here illegally, and you choose to have your citizen child, that's on you. That's not on this administration. If you choose to put your family in that position, that's on them.
The Trump administration is defending their decision to deport 3 children with US citizenship to Honduras with their mothers, including one child with cancer. The children are from 2 different families who are living in Louisiana. Both families were detained earlier last week during routine check-ins with ICE in New Orleans. They were in the Intensive Supervision Appearance Program, a probationary program that allows people undergoing immigration proceedings to stay in the country. But both the women had reportedly missed one of these check-ins previously, so judges filed deportation orders. On the day they were detained, ICE agents were waiting for them to arrive at their appointment. Lawyers said the families were taken to Alexandria, Louisiana, 3 hours from New Orleans, where they weren't permitted to communicate with legal representatives. The lawyers weren't able to reach their mothers until after they arrived in Honduras. The mother of the 2-year-old is pregnant, and the 4-year-old, a boy, has a rare form of late-stage cancer, the family's lawyers said. They said the boy had no access to his medications or his doctors while he was in custody with his 7-year-old sister and mother. The administration is defending sending these kids to Honduras, claiming the moms requested the children stay with them. But lawyers for both families dispute that, saying the moms weren't given an option to leave their children in the United States. Lawyers representing the father of the 2-year-old US citizen who was deported, identified as VML in court documents, filed an emergency petition in the Western District of Louisiana on Thursday, seeking her release. But the child was put on a plane to Honduras the next morning before the court even opened. Hours after the deportation, US District Judge Terry A. Doughty, a Trump appointee, issued an order expressing his concern that the girl had been deported against her father's wishes, while stressing it is illegal and unconstitutional to deport US citizens. Doughty set a May 16th court hearing to investigate his, quote, strong suspicion that the government just deported a US citizen with no meaningful process, end quote. According to Gracie Willis, one of the lawyers representing the families, another attorney's effort to keep the 4-year-old with cancer in the States were also ignored. Take a look.
That attorney filed what's called an administrative stay of removal, which is a request for ICE to just temporarily halt any deportation in the interest of something happening. And in this case, the lawyer requested the opportunity to file paperwork, complicated paperwork with the court to provide immigration options to the mother, and especially to allow this 4-year-old to continue treatment. The attorney filed paperwork with ICE explaining what this child's medical situation was, explaining the diagnosis, and didn't receive any kind of a response until the family was already on a plane on Friday morning.
Nonetheless, Marco Rubio, like Tom Homan, is denying any wrongdoing. Take a look.
On the headline, that's a misleading headline. Okay, 3 US citizens, ages 4, 7, and 2, were not deported. Their mothers, who are legally in this country, were deported. The children went with their mothers. If those children are US citizens, they can come back into the United States if there's their father or someone here who wants to assume them. But ultimately, who was deported was their mothers who were here illegally. The children just went with their mothers. But it wasn't like, you guys make it sound like ICE agents kicked down the door and grabbed the 2-year-old and threw him on an airplane. That's misleading. Yeah. That's just not true.
But again, the families and their lawyers dispute the fact that the moms wanted the children to go with them, and they were sent out of the country before the court had a chance to intervene. Cenk, what do you make of this story?
Yeah, there's 2 different things here. Number one, the content of the story. So the Trump administration now puts out statements so absurd. They're in the ballpark of Baghdad Bob, the official Saddam Hussein spokesperson, who would talk about how there were no Americans in Iraq as American tanks were literally rolling behind them on camera, right? And maybe approaching the absurdity of IDF statements. IDF, oh yes, 12 children were killed today in Gaza. No, they were all 87-year-old Hamas leaders. Okay, whatever, man. So now, oh yes, we have a handwritten note from one of the moms in Spanish. Maybe we don't. The other mom we don't have anything on, but trust us, she wanted to take her 4-year-old who has cancer that has metastasized to Honduras instead of continuing to get treatment in America. No, we don't trust you, and that's not what the family says. The family's saying, please bring them back. They didn't even take the medication with them because they didn't know they were gonna get hijacked and kidnapped. They were US citizens. We didn't know that a bunch of thugs were gonna come and take them away without their cancer medication. So, look, man, there's no end to the excuses for people who are in favor of this stuff. So, but guys, the second point is more important. The second point is about due process. So I know some on the right will say, hey, listen, I believe Marco Rubio. Good luck with that. I believe Donald Trump. Good luck with that. And Homan and all those guys. And the moms are undocumented and there is a court order. And if she wanted to take the kids, I understand your point on that. But do you understand what US District Judge Dowdy is saying? We didn't go through any procedure here. You tell me, the family's telling me that you deported these American citizens. You're saying no, they left voluntarily. But I never had a hearing. They never had a hearing. So I have no idea who's telling the truth. That's why we do hearings. That's why we have courts. That's why we do due process. And we don't just take your word for it. I mean, Trump's already talked about potentially deporting US citizens to El Salvador. Again, in his mad ramblings, presumably in the same way that he's doing now, without any due process. So what else can you do to a US citizen without due process? And then tell us later, oh yeah, it's okay. Can you murder a US citizen without asking a judge and just go, no, trust me. The family wanted it. I took the, a 27-year-old down to Guatemala and I slit his throat, but it's okay. He wanted his throat slit, or he was MS-28 or whatever he was. It's okay. I gave you some BS talking point. Trust me. Trust the Israeli government. Trust Baghdad Bob. It's okay. No, that's not how our system works. This is America. We have a constitution. We have due process. Those are the cornerstones of Western civilization, and we don't give those away because there's a madman in office who wants to look like he's tough on immigrants. And if you think, oh, Cenk, you're getting carried away. Now, what kind of absurd hypothetical is this? You bring a 28-year-old down and slit their throat in Guatemala. The 4-year-old in Honduras doesn't have their cancer medication, and it's metastasized. We've been trying to get back, all sane people in America have been trying to, which is now over 70% of Americans want them back. Abrego Garcia, the Trump administration has admitted that it was an error and they won't bring him back. So how long is it gonna take to bring back the 4-year-old US citizen who's a cancer patient and has no medication down there? And what if they die? What if they die? Is MAGA still gonna be flipping about it? Like, yeah, so what, man? That 4-year-old died. And by the way, I'm pro-life. And by the way, I love the Constitution, except the Constitution. I hate it, and I don't think we should follow it. And I think we should burn the courts down and the Constitution down. If this is what you think is making America great again, I got bad news for you. The rest of America doesn't agree. It is absurd, it's overreach, it's crazy, it's un-American.
I just want to point out why they were deported. And this was allegedly that they missed a meeting and then they were transferred 3 hours away and weren't permitted to meet with their lawyers. Now that part specifically, I want to zero in on because that is not new. That happened under Obama. There were facilities, family detention facilities, which are really just prisons for families who are seeking refuge here as they waited their credible fear interviews as part of the asylum process. And as they were held in these facilities in like Karnes County in Texas along the border, Obama's officials also would not let lawyers meet with these people. So we need to, of course, express outrage over this happening now, but we also need to hold Democratic administrations to the exact same standard. And like Cenk is talking about, we need to think about how we want this country to operate, what we want this country to be, and what we think represents the best of us. And I think many people watching this, it is an inclusive society where we extend rights and liberties to everyone, regardless of documentation or status. That's fair, that's equitable, and that's just. But that also means holding Democratic leaders to account when they're in office and it comes time to extend due process rights to undocumented people under a Democratic administration. And unfortunately, under the Obama administration, that wasn't happening.
Yeah, I'm gonna add one quick thing to that. So this is why we piss off people on both sides. They want rah-rah cheerleaders for one side or the other. Sorry, we're not gonna do that. We're gonna tell you the truth. Barack Obama not only did what Jordan's talking about and deported more people than any other president, but you want to talk about due process, he killed an American citizen without asking any courts, and then his ridiculous Attorney General Eric Holder said that due process is not necessarily a judicial process. Well, that's just absurd, totally, utterly absurd. And we're not calling that out now, we called it out then. And what happened, it wasn't just other Democrats. This is why mainstream media has massive, massive problems. This is why the country hates the establishment so much that they voted for Trump. Because mainstream media, when Trump does it, okay, they're on it. Good, that's a good thing. They should be on it, we're on it, right? When Obama does it, they're like, what? American US citizen, due process, what name so? Deporting 2 million people without doing it the right way, what name so? It's beloved Democratic leadership, beloved corporate politicians. They've taken some sort of oath to never ever criticize them. So I'm sick of it. Do real reporting, do real journalism, hold all sides accountable. If you're in media, you're not supposed to kiss up to the powerful. You're supposed to challenge the powerful. I know it's a new concept for them. Both sides should check it out, and most importantly, journalists should check it out. Bring those kids back right away. US citizens, if their family wants them back, bring them back, and most importantly, but you've got to follow due process. If you don't do that, then as Trump would say ironically, then we don't have a country. If we don't have due process, we have a dictatorship, and it ain't America, okay? You must check with the courts. That's how it's supposed to work, no matter whether you're a Republican or Democrat. All right, we got to take a break here. When we come back, Jordan and I might debate. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Jordan with you guys. One more story for you. Jordan, go ahead.
Another Democrat in Congress is retiring, but this time it resurfaces a recent fight between establishment Democrats and progressives. Virginia Democrat Gerry Connolly announced today that he will not seek re-election due to his cancer diagnosis. When I announced my diagnosis 6 months ago, I promised transparency. After grueling treatments, we've learned that the cancer, while initially beaten back, has now returned. I'll do everything possible to continue to represent you and thank you for your grace. He also added that he'll be stepping down from a prominent committee post. The sun is setting on my time in public service, and this will be my last term in Congress. I will be stepping back as ranking member of the Oversight Committee soon with no rancor and a full heart. I move into this final chapter full of pride in what we've accomplished together over 30 years. My loving family and staff sustain me, my extended family. You all have been a joy to serve. Some may remember that Connolly and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez were both vying for the position of ranking member on oversight, but House Democrats narrowly voted last December to give that position to Connolly. That was befuddling to many progressives and even some Democrats who supported AOC for the position, as oversight is a critical committee if we're keeping the administration in check. And given that Connolly had just been diagnosed with esophageal cancer the month prior, many wondered if he was up to the task. But let's look at what Connolly and his allies were saying when committee assignments were being deliberated. Connolly's trademark vigor made colleagues comfortable that he could take on the Trump administration despite his age and recent cancer diagnosis, multiple lawmakers told Axios. Said Connolly, "We're looking at capability. We're not looking at age. Is somebody capable, irrespective of how old they are? And if they bring energy and enthusiasm?" And I think this one takes the case. The cake, Representative Dawn Beyer of Virginia added, "Jerry's a young 74, cancer notwithstanding." Now, Cenk, I know you've got more you want to get into after this, but on Connolly stepping down, I mean, 100 days in, I don't remember much from Connolly's time as House Oversight Chair, which makes you wonder, why did he need that position so bad to begin with?
Yeah, I don't remember much about Connolly's tenure as US Congressman, period. To be fair to Connolly, though, I don't remember much about 200 Democrats in Congress that just sit in a cave somewhere. Every once in a while, I'll hear about a new Democratic congressman. I'm like, really? And I don't mean new as in they're new. I mean, I heard about it recently, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, that guy's from Philadelphia. He's been a congressman for 28 years." But the reason why they never come out, whether it's whether we're going to find out if it's spring or not, right, is because they think, well, I got this comfortable position, I have status, power, fame, whatever I have, right? Well, not much fame since they never show themselves in public, and so I'm just going to sit here on my ass and do nothing. So tell me what amazing things Connolly did in his career. Anyway, so the reason I bring that up is not because I'm trying to hate on Connolly. Okay, I wish him well with his treatment. He was a Democrat, so and you need those votes, etc. But I'm tired of the establishment telling us how wonderful their 70, 80, 90-year-old members are, how amazing they are. What did you pass? What did you guys all collectively pass that you're all so wonderful and that we just can't live without you? Oh, we can't go to the new guard. No way. Because the old guard's been killing it? Have they? Have they? So to answer Jordan's question, why do they want to keep him, have him in that position? And why did he easily win that vote? Because most of the Democratic Congress people are super old, and they waited like 20, 30 years to get these irrelevant positions that they were going to do nothing with. So they're like, wait a minute, I'm not gonna have these young whippersnappers just because they're effective and are aggressive and can actually fight back, do the job right. No, I'm gonna do it because I've been waiting 28 years for this. And seniority is more important, incumbency is the most important. Protecting our status and privilege is the most important thing in the world. No, it isn't. I don't care about your status and privilege at all, at all. So yeah, obviously AOC should have gotten that position in the first place. Gee, I wonder who's going to be a more charismatic speaker and effectively fight back, AOC or Connolly, who you've literally never heard of before.
Yeah, AOC isn't even on that committee anymore. She's on Energy and Commerce, and while they have some role in evaluating and calling out what the administration does, oversight is a very, very important committee. Raskin chaired that committee in the last term. It was, to me, it was always purely about keeping progressives at bay. And many people on the left who are a bit more cynical on how you can work within the system have been pointing out, like, look, you're playing the game. You tried to cheer on the Biden administration. You tried to help propel Kamala Harris to victory. You spoke at the DNC. You were very flattering of the administration and their purported efforts for a ceasefire, and this is how they treat you. And I think to many people, they'll look at that and say, why should we even work with them? Why should we even try to work within this system if this is how they're still going to treat us? I don't think that they're entirely wrong in that criticism. It fuels cynicism about how Democrats will treat progressives. And I think it's going to take a lot of people trying to buck the system, trying to take it on head first, rather than try to work within it.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite part was the quote about Connolly's trademark vigor. That was a trademark lost on me, brother. Okay, really? He has a trademark vigor. That's why he's been breathing fire against Republicans and insisting on passing the most popular parts of the Democratic policy plex. All right, look, last thing on old guard versus new guard. Recently, we talked about David Hogg starting a PAC, and he's now the DNC vice chair. And so he wants to raise $20 million, run in blue seats against incumbents. I'm 100% in favor of that. I believe Jordan's 100% in favor of that. But I did say on the show that, that I get it and it makes sense. And Jordan's right. The establishment has a terrible track record. The DNC has a terrible track record of being, and that's what I talked about. The DNC's track record of being hypocritical on this issue. The minute progressives do something, hey, we found a rule. And when establishment guys, incumbents do something, oh, golly gee, we just couldn't find a way to be fair, right? But I think that Ken Martin at the DNC is trying to pass a rule that makes sense, which is the DNC officers should be neutral. And so 99 out of 100 times, they're not neutral in the establishment direction. In this case, it happens to be in the progressive direction. And so I get it, and Jordan will say how convenient, and that's what I said earlier. But I do like the rule, Jordan. I think the DNC officers should be neutral, and if it's a potential moment for a Marbury versus Madison type of moment where the Supreme Court ruled against their political interests, but gave themselves the power to be able to adjudicate cases coming from the executive branch. So in this case, if you call it the Hogg rule, and okay, David has to make a decision about at least taking himself off of the electoral part of the PAC and staying as DNC vice chair, or just going full bore into the PAC, at least then we could apply that very, very clearly to every other DNC officer and make sure that they do not touch any PACs and rig any rules in favor of the establishment.
I mean, yeah, like of course it's how convenient. I would like to see them do this in any other circumstance, right? Until then, I'm just going to disregard it and just chalk it up to more business as usual. Because what Hogg is doing is saying, hey, let's get new people in there. Let's get rid of the old guard who is just preserving the status quo, and let's get some people who actually want to go in and do work. And the DNC is saying, no, we can't do that. You gotta remain neutral. We can't interfere with the poor, sweet old guard, the establishment Democrats. Like if they were doing this and the roles were reversed, I'd be shocked. But every single time that they put their thumb on the scales or issue some new rule or tut somebody, it is to preserve the people who are already entrenched in power. I'll remind people that after the Sanders campaign of 2016, they threatened to blacklist any vendors or consultants, any groups, any strategists who helped any sort of progressive challenger. That was also specifically to try to thwart Justice Democrats' influence. You had Josh Gottheimer, who worked with the Chamber of Commerce and business interests to undermine the key parts of Biden's legislative agenda, the Build Back Better plan. He was working with businesses to kill that. He's teaming up with Hakeem Jeffries for a PAC, Team Blue PAC. He did this a couple years ago. Ryan Grimm has written about it. Team Blue PAC to protect Democratic incumbents against progressive challengers. They're fine with all of that. So I want to see them do some sort of throwing their weight around when it comes to anybody else. Because all I have seen for years is them saying, no, it's fine. We got to protect the status quo. We got to protect the incumbent Democrats. And every single ruling, every single issuance of guidance or anything always comes at the expense of outside challengers. So I refuse to give Ken Martin or the DNC any credit because I haven't seen this applied in any sort of fair way. And maybe it will, but until then, I'm withholding judgment.
Okay, I have a proposal. See if we can get to a compromise. So because look, we agree on so much of this. We both agree that the PAC is great. There's nothing wrong with the PAC. Definitely run against incumbents, right? So number two, let me see if I can get agreement on this. We both agree that the DNC's past has been terrible. They've been entirely biased. Anyone claiming that they weren't biased is out of their minds, right? Now, but on the other hand, Ken Martin has a track record of being very progressive in Minnesota and helped to pass a lot of progressive legislation, actually got things done. et cetera. So I think it's a little unfair to put the entire DNC history on Ken Martin. I also think Ken Martin has to understand that DNC history exists. Are we okay so far, Jordan? Is that fair so far?
Sure.
Okay.
I think there's more to it than that, but I want to see if there's anything else.
Okay, so now the compromise is, why don't we do both at the same time then? All right, and I'll offer one of two things. Look, when you talk about the terrible things that DNC did in the past, is a giant list, right? Like Debbie Wasserman Schultz had money flowing from donors to the state parties to Hillary Clinton, but not to Bernie Sanders. That level of cheating was 10,000 times worse than what Hogg is proposing here. Would they have actually ousted her? No way. And they didn't, of course. And they didn't. They covered it up. Have they condemned it since? No, even though it was a massive case of cheating at the very highest levels, et cetera. Now, and that's literally cheating. That was against the bylaws. It was against everything, okay? So now there are two things, but that's gone. So there are two things that we could do. Okay, all right, I get the need for neutrality for the DNC officers, and I'm now apparently calling it the Hogg rule. So I like that, and I think Ken Martin is right about that. Okay, then does it also apply to Democratic leaders? Because if we're talking about leadership of the Democratic Party, so does Hakeem Jeffries have to stop his PAC, which is aimed at protecting incumbents and against primary challengers who are very often progressives and populists? So this is not a deal that, I mean, I don't know if you'd accept a deal, Jordan, but I'm curious whether the DNC will accept a deal. Or are we gonna have two different sets of rules, one for progressives and one for the beloved establishment, Hakeem Jeffries and the rest? Okay, if you don't like that one, how about this one? Jordan talked about the blacklist, right? So how about the blacklist? Did anyone ever even take away the blacklist? Did they ever bring those people back? Did they ever lift it? Does that garbage still exist? I mean, at least like a clarification on it, right? And did anyone get blacklisted for working on a campaign against Jamal Bowman or Cori Bush? Can we go back and blacklist them? Because I thought we had a blacklist against incumbents. Look, what I'm looking for is consistency. And I'm okay with consistency applied to progressives, including David Hogg. But it's got to be applied to the other side as well. So if the Democratic Party now says, no, I'm going to continue blacklisting anyone who helps a progressive primary challenger, and I'm not going to blacklist the vendors that help the incumbents. Help conservative Democrats, corporate Democrats run against incumbent progressives. And no, Hakeem Jeffries and Gottheimer, well, Gottheimer's not a leader, but Hakeem Jeffries and others, they can run any PAC they like, only progressives like Hogg can. Then okay, then you're not being consistent. So what do you think of the proposal to do them at the same time, Jordan?
Yeah, but again, it's all hypothetical. If they were to do that, of course, yeah, that I guess be a step in the right direction. But the one thing for me is like that makes me less optimistic that it would be ever applied in an equitable and fair and all-inclusive way, is that the DNC is a machine. And they ultimately operate at the behest of their big donors, special interests, corporations. They rely on funding in part from those entities. And those people don't want progressives to win. Those donors don't want progressives to win, but they need that money. So I don't think they're ever going to be in a position where they could operate in that way. You saw, major corporate donors at the DNC convention. You see groups like Democratic Majority for Israel very present and have a robust presence at the DNC, distributing booklets promoting Kamala Harris's support for Israel at the DNC. They're not dismissing or pushing those people out of their circle. They're not getting them. They're not keeping them at arm's length or admonishing them. These people are especially Democratic Majority for Israel, are spending millions on races to unseat progressives. How many millions spent unseating Cori Bush, like you talked about. No, they don't care. They're fine with that, as long as it helps preserve corporate Democrats and their power. So while Ken Martin may have good intentions, while he could have been a good, like you say, He was a good progressive in Minnesota. He is now part of a machine, and he's a figurehead for a machine that is ultimately adversarial to progressive interests.
Has been. There are good progressives that supported Bernie, that support Ken Martin and this rule. But the DNC has been that institution. I think they need to acknowledge that. And they need to give an olive branch back, right? If they, okay, I mean, I know they'll never ever do this, right? But okay, Democratic majority for Israel, AIPAC, and all the other Israeli lobbies, and if there's any other foreign lobbies that worked against incumbents like Bowman and Bush, if they're banned and they're blacklisted like progressive organizations were, okay, now that's an olive branch, and now we could have a deal. Now we all know they're never, ever, ever going to do that because they love that kind of PAC money. So you can't have it both ways. That's the thing we all agree on, right? So I like the neutrality rule, but if they're going to do that, I think the most reasonable compromise is then Hakeem Jeffries and any other Democratic leader in the House also has to divorce themselves from their PACs. Because what you want, unilateral disarmament on one side, but not the other, that doesn't seem to make sense to me. So let's have even rules that are neutrally applied. So I like the neutrality rule, but the neutrality rule should be in the context of actually being neutral. That's my proposal. Okay, and my guess is they'll say there's nothing we could do about Hakeem Jeffries, there's nothing we could do about AIPAC or Democratic Majority for Israel, there's nothing we could do about blacklists, there's nothing we could do about anything. But to be fair, I haven't checked on what their latest thing with the blacklists are and whether people got taken off the blacklist. So, but look, my point is I'm principled. Neutrality is the right rule and we should apply it equally to both sides. We see equality, then it's a different question and a different ballgame. All right, we gotta go. We're way over. Jordan, you're awesome. Everybody check him out at Rebel HQ, and you're nearby golf course. Okay, all right, much love. When we come back, Sharon's gonna join us, and Bernie Sanders calling out a fellow Democrat. Finally. All right, Bernie, we'll be right back.